here as well, just letting you know that you're being recorded. And again, this is about basic digitizing, but really getting to how to draw really clean artwork. Okay, I'm going to turn off the grid so we can look at this a little bit here. So, and again, and just hit the W key to make it go away. The first thing you want to do is you want to draw the shape here. We imported a piece of artwork, and we wanted to start drawing what's going to sew first, because obviously whatever sews first is going to be on the bottom, and we want the background here to be on the bottom. So we'll start with the, we're going to start with this interior dark blue fill stitch. A couple things that I'm thinking about as I'm looking at this. I want to make sure that my stitches are running at an angle so that they're not going to run at 90 degrees to the satin stitch that's going to sew here. So that's one of the things I'm thinking, but because the satin stitches are all curving and changing angles, I don't have a problem with that. If you have questions on that later, we can talk about that. But I'm going to go ahead and trace this. And one thing I'm keeping in mind when I'm drawing is that when it tapers to a point, stitching is going to go back and forth in rows like this. But as it gets shorter and shorter, then this is going to zigzag into tiny useless stitches. If you look at a grid again, I don't want to stitch shorter than 1 millimeter. So I want to, since I can overlap into this light blue, I'm just going to let it, to make it easier on the machine, I'm going to taper it into a wide area anyway here so that this kind of overlaps. The software will automatically overlap this area if we draw it right to the line, but I'm going to help it out anyway. So I'm going to go to Digitizing, and then I want to choose my Freeform tool for fill stitches. Now, I could click Digitizing in Freeform, but let's say I'm moving around with my cursor here, and I want to get into it. My favorite shortcut for that is hit D and then the letter F. And notice that I didn't go up there, and we're already in Freeform drawing mode, which is great. And also, since I want to draw straight across here to make a horizontal, what's really easy is if you go to Tools and System Parameters and turn on your crosshair, it makes it really easy to draw a straight across line, because now hold down the Control key for a corner click. There's my corner click, and if I want to go straight across, and I just align my cursor with that, my crosshair with that, and then I can just kind of continue down drawing this. And again, I'm going to draw this the hard way by drawing down the middle, even though the program will automatically, with its settings, know to overlap to the right amount. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to just do this by hand because I've just been doing it that way for a long time. Here also, I'm going to make my fine point just to square it off, because this is all going to underlap basically into that satin stitch. So, and also you'll notice that I'm able to turn the cursor into a hand by holding down the space bar is what I'm doing. And that lets me stay zoomed in, and it lets me move the canvas around. Just like if you were moving around a giant sheet of paper and you had to draw such fine detail that you had to keep your eyes really close to the paper, and you would drag it around by your hand as you're moving along. That's what I'm doing, is dragging the artwork. So, and I'll just continue on clicking it. Remember, I don't have to do any other tools. Just keep clicking. It knows that it's in drawing mode. See, I'm just, my hand is, my cursor turns into a hand just by pressing the space bar, and I can continue to stay zoomed in as I'm laying points.
You're not still using the control button, are you?
I am, but right now, notice these are round points right here, so I'm not using the control button. The only place I'm using the control button, and Jim, that's a really good point, was right here, because I wanted a squared off point. So now when we go back and draw the satin stitches, we are going to make a nice, clean, sharp point there as the artwork calls for it. But since this fill stitch is going to, and here's a control button here as well, but since this fill stitch is going to underlap in here, that point doesn't matter. In fact, it's good that I don't meet my points here. That puts the stitches, if you really want to think advanced, that puts a stitch edge right over here so that the stitches don't coincide with these points here, and you wind up having a cleaner embroidery because of that. You don't have as many stitches stacked in the same spot. So now, in reality, you can draw this precisely, but with a nice regular shape like this, I don't have to have so many mouse points. I'm going to delete these last two just by hitting the delete key once, then twice. Notice that goes away. I don't need my cursor anymore. I'm just going to make it go away for our video presentation, but I usually leave that on. Oh, that's something else arriving at Texmac in the background. Apologize for the noise. But notice the curve tool is actually pretty good at following even with just a couple of mouse clicks. And I can always adjust the curve on the fly by moving my cursor onto the shape. And I can actually hide the image live on the fly. Press the letter L, which is nice, and then I can actually adjust the curve on the fly. You do not have to be an artist to draw this. You can just kind of rough it out and just make sure it matches up. And again, notice I'm putting squared off points here. And if you really want to, you can see that I can actually join this. Here's another of my new favorite shortcuts. It's press the number 0, and that actually joins the open end. And what you can do instead of drawing all that is I can actually just kind of grab the line and then drag it in until that matches up. So you can see you can draw a shape with a lot of points like this, or just a few points, or if you really know how to take advantage of a nice even curve, you can set down a minimum number of points. So just showing you all the tricks here. Now let's say that you messed up, and I'm going to press the letter Z and that goes into zoom mode, and I'll zoom around this area. Let's say you messed up and you made this a curve instead of a straight point. So you forgot to press the control key. You can hold down the control key and click and change that point. You can hold down the control key and click and change that point to different kinds of points. And that helps you in case you're not quite so accurate the first time around. And believe me, when I'm digitizing, I take advantage of that, because sometimes I'm just kind of digitizing and thinking about 10 other things. So it's nice that you don't have to be dead on perfect the first time around, and you can always fix your stuff live on the fly. All right, so we've drawn our shape, and we've closed it in, and to generate stitches, you hit stitches or generate stitches here, or right-click and go stitch it. And what I recommend doing is make sure that you're viewing your embroidery settings. So I right-click up. Hang on a second. I want to view my embroidery settings here. And it's right-clicking for me. So let me back out of that and try that again. I want to view my embroidery settings there, design embroidery settings, and usually the G key will do it. So let me try it again. All right. So D, C, or D. Freeform tool, and use your control clicks to click, and I'll just go ahead and bust this out at real speed here. And in reality, again, I would use my crosshair in case I have any horizontal or vertical lines, so it makes it much easier to draw perfect lines. I wonder if that's my noise. Sorry. Maybe. Okay, so we've drawn our shape, and then go to Design and Embroidery Settings. Keep that live, and you want to think about as you're filling in your shapes. Notice, even though we're doing a few other things, you can always edit the shape as you're working. Okay, so you want to pick your density, underlay, and stretch, or if you're new to the game, you can always, and since we're not about the settings today, I'll just go to preset fabrics and use something that I like. So I want to do this for a piqué knit polo, or let's do a jacket back, but there's still a little bit of winter left. So let's do a nice heavy jacket. Maybe let's do fleece. So there's a pullover here, and let's do polar fleece. So when it fills in the stitches, it's going to make the stitches correct for polar fleece. So and I'm going to hit apply, and that sets the defaults for everything that you draw from here on out, so that any other shapes that I do, it's going to adjust all the settings automatically without you having to think for polar fleece, which means increased underlay, density, and pull compensation, stuff you don't have to know right away. So I draw my shape, and I hit stitch it. It's going to ask me for the direction. I'll leave it at, you can set the angle here by number. I can go 0, for example, for straight across. Okay, so 0. And you're going to see that now my direction line goes straight across. That's going to be the angle of the stitching. Now it asks me for the starting and ending points. So I want to start this at the top and end at the bottom. And I want it to be in this color. So a neat little trick is that you can find the color swatch of the current color, which is up here, and then change it to the actual artwork color by moving your cursor into the blue here and hitting OK. And now it's going to create the stitches in that color. So, and then my exit point down here. So now you can see the stitches on top. You also see that we've got a stitch count of 1,700 stitches, which is not bad. And it's also made for polar fleece, so we did a bunch of things. So in real speed, setting that aside so to give you an idea of this, of how we did this, again, without having to think, I did D and then freeform DF automatically we're automatically in the freeform tool mode. So that's really useful if you're digitizing satins and fills and you're switching around. You can just type without having to go back and forth with your mouse to have to click on all these buttons. You can just do it by your keyboard shortcuts. Draw your shape. I'm going to hit 0 to close that in. Make any adjustments as need be. That looks pretty good. Make any adjustments here. That looks pretty good. Hit stitch it. Make sure you hit apply. To keep the defaults if you like it. It's going to ask me to input my direction. It's already at 0 from what we last did. So I'm just going to hit enter and then right click to the next step. Now it's asking me for my entry point. Let's say I wanted to start at the bottom. Now it's asking me for my exit point. I'll click to start it to end at the top. And that's fairly quick and accurate, and we've accomplished several things, not just making the stitch shape, but also optimizing this for the particular garment we're going to sew on. All right. Next thing we'll talk about is satin stitches. And oh, Billy's got a question here. When you right-click when digitizing, when do you use the open curve option? Okay, very, very good point. Let's hide the artwork here. Well, I'm going to get rid of the stitches here and just move them off to the side. So I'm tracing, so DF for Digitize Freeform tool. And you can start anywhere and trace, but like Billy, like your question is, what is the open curve, closed curve? So I'm going to show you right now we're drawing with what's called an open curve. If I hide the image by hitting L, you can see that as I'm drawing this shape, there's an open, the first end that I start drawing is unattached to the second end, the other end. So as I keep drawing, it stays that way. Notice that as I keep clicking, they stay unattached. But for a fill stitch, you want it completely enclosed. Think of it like baking a cake, and this is your cake mold that you're building. You're building your cake mold. If you pour the cake mold in here right now, it's all just going to flow out the open end. You want a totally enclosed shape that corrals the stitches. So if you right-click, you can go to uncheck open curve, and that joins this. But my favorite shortcut is instead of doing that to right-click and do that, just hit the number 0. And notice now that's joined. If I hit 0 again, it's not joined. So that's open, 0 is closed again. So a nice fast trick for opening and closing a shape. So hopefully that answers your question there, Billy. And anybody else that has questions, feel free to jump in on this too. So, and there's no such thing as too basic a question here. So let me know if there's something that really jumps out. All right.
That's the number 0 or the letter 0?
The number, sorry, the number 0. Okay. So across the top, right? The number, yeah, the number 0 above the O key and the QWERTY keys, those numbers. So, all right. So that's the difference between an open and a closed curve. Now, we already created, and I'm going to just click and delete this one. We already created our background fill stitch, and now we want to do. You know what I would probably do is just to keep the color changes together. I'll do this blue, this navy blue, and then go ahead and do the lighter blue on top of this. Now this is going to take a couple of tricks, and I'll show you why. Is that if we draw, and I want to use the column tool for. And we were using the freeform tool, but the column is now really, really good for satin stitches. The freeform is good for fills. So, and I finished up here, and you can see the neat thing is that you can see the flashing plus sign there shows me the last stitch. And in the artwork, I want to maybe start as close to where I left off as possible. That way, there's no trim, there's no and a very tiny jump, so the machine stays at high speed. This thing sews smoother. So I want to start the first stitch of the next thing closest to where I left off, which stitch and sew marks with a fat flashing plus. All right, now normally if I'm drawing a satin stitch if I'm drawing for a satin stitch and I hit the Z key there to zoom in, and then I'm going to hit D and then column. Your column tool, and I know, Jim, you probably experimented with this, but this is the standard satin stitch tool for most embroidery machines. And what you're going to do is you're drawing back and forth like this to make the shape. Now I'm going to hit delete and actually trace the artwork. Now this suggests that I want to kind of flow all the way around like this. Now, this is a mistake that I see a lot of people make. And you wind up not having very good stitches here, no matter how perfectly you draw the artwork. And Jim, as you may guess, and then maybe Lisa and Billy probably guess here, is that as the stitches make the severe turn like this, you wind up having a lot of stitches bunched down in here and a lot of stitches that are spread out here. So this winds up not being really good embroidery. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to go ahead and build stitches on that. So I'm going to hit stitch it. And we don't have to set any angles because the angles are set up by how we draw the shape with these crossbar references, or what I call guides. And we're still in dark blue, our dark blue swatch, so I don't have to change any color. Set my starting and ending points, and if I hide the image, you can see there's my stitch. And you can actually go and view in simulation mode, which is Alt-R. Now you can see a realistic mode, and if I zoom out to maybe 100%, one-to-one, you can actually see the image. This is already starting. That actually looks nice, but what you really want to avoid is a lot of stitches that are spread out here, and then a lot of stitches that are bunched here. So in severe angles with satin stitches, that happens. I'm gonna just move that off to the side and show you how I would actually do this. Is I would actually digitize with the column tool, going back and forth. And let it kind of meet and overlap. And what we're going to do is what the industry calls a capped corner. I'm going to draw it like this and finish it. So I'm going to hit stitch it, and pretending I'm starting from here where I left off, and then I'm going to end right here. And then so far my stitch looks like this. But then what I'm going to do is I'm also noticed that it actually added stabilizing underlay and a bunch of other things because we set polar fleece as our default. So we're not having to think about density underlay or anything. Now what I do for my capped corners, I'm going to hit Z to zoom in and draw a box around here so you can see this, is that I'm going to type, or I'm going to go ahead and digitize with my column tool. Another thing I'm going to do is hit the O key, which highlights my vector lines, O, so I can see exactly where I have to meet my other vector lines, or my outline. So I'll just start clicking right here. And then I want to go across, and I'm tracing right to the line. In fact, I drew this one wrong. Let me start over. D, C for column, and I'm going to start here, go across, and I want to draw this taper just by going back and forth. But to make this taper up here, I get real short. I don't want my stitch to be shorter than a millimeter, so I want to make sure my last piece is at least a millimeter across. And then I can adjust my curvature to match the shape. Now I don't really need this crosshair, so I'm going to get rid of it. Tools, system parameters, uncheck displayed cross. So this is what's called a capped corner. And if you accidentally click on something, I can hit delete because it just started to create a new shape. But watch your cursor and wait until it recognizes that you're on top of the shape. So watch, that's a plus, but as I hover right over the shape, there, that's changed, and now I can grab and pull. So be aware of what your cursor is telling you that it thinks it's doing. So that helps you so that you can click at the right moment. All right, so that shape's drawn. I hit stitch it, and again, set your starting and ending points. Stitch it. And it's asking you at the bottom. It's always going to tell you what to do, what it wants to do next, starting, then ending point. And we can kind of continue in high speed here. Just kind of, I'll zoom out, and let's move on. And here's a nice little shortcut that I'll do. Hopefully, if you have a truly symmetrical shape, then you can really capitalize on that. And I can hit S to hide the stitches. This is really cool. So you can see the outlines of what I drew. You can see why I'm off here. I can edit that really quickly and then make that one line up. Hit enter. Okay, so I want to hit L to show my image again, and I'll kind of zoom in right here and just pick up where we left off. Okay, so drawing, DC, digitizing, column. Bear with me, guys. I think my video's hung. I'll save this real quick and then we'll start over here. All right. And I know why. Okay, so digitizing, column tool. Here we go. Now we're good. So we keep on tracing. And anytime you have a repeat in the process, another shortcut you may be guessing is that you can copy, paste, and repeat. So I'm going to do that so I don't have to do any more work than I need to. Overlap a little bit here. And then I'm going to see if I can get away with doing this. The program keeps track of what you've done if you go to show your object list. And here are my two shapes that I want to repeat. I want this and this. And let me see if I can't copy and paste it. So select it. Make sure you're not in editing or digitizing mode. You can always hit escape, right click and copy it. And let's try to rotate it and see what happens. So Control V and then click on this, and you can either rotate it by dragging it around, or if I really want to be slick, is Control V and then go to Design, and I don't know why they put it here, but change size. Oh, it's not going to let me until I set it down. So let me set it down. Click off of it, and then I want to select this and go Design. Editing. Design. Change size. And I can rotate it 90 degrees, and I'll do it clockwise. Now we can pick that up and move it, and hopefully it'll align. And yes, look at that. That really aligns very nicely. And then I can paste it again. This time I got to rotate it twice. So I want to go Design, change size. Instead of twice rotating, I want to rotate instead of once at 90, I'll just go 180 clockwise. You can see how we can save ourselves a lot of time doing that. As hand-drawn as this shape kind of looks, it looks like it's nice and even enough that we can actually do that. And again, I'll even get rid of this right here, this partial segment. And I'll paste that, and we'll rotate that again. Instead of 180, we'll do 270. Or negative 90 degrees. So select this. Design, change size. Again, for some reason, the rotate by degree is here. You go counterclockwise, 90 degrees. That lines up very well, so that saves us a lot of time creating the shape. And we're going to do exactly the same thing for the light blue. So I'll pause here for any questions here. I just want to make sure that you guys are able to see that what I'm doing are shortcuts that make it faster to do the basic everyday day-to-day stuff, so that you're not having to click everywhere anywhere unnecessarily. It saves you a lot of time when actually drawing.
That's neat.
Okay, and hopefully that'll help you a little bit in drawing. One thing that I've been using a lot lately is if you get out of simulation mode or 3D mode, so I go to view and then get rid of realistic view, and you want to really see where everything lines up. It's one thing to see the stitches, But the stitches have a lot of overlap that are built in to where you want the shape to be. And if I zoom in real quick, you can see that it may be difficult to see, but if I hit the letter O, or here's the stitches, and the stitches are deliberately programmed to overflow the shape, because when they actually sew, they're going to quote-unquote underflow. They're actually going to sew tighter and smaller. So if I hit the letter O, you can see these lines, these outlines are actually where we're telling it to sew, and that's how much overlap is getting built in here. So the program's doing that automatically to prevent gaps and to make sure it sews at the size that you're looking for, and all because we picked polar fleece or whatever it is that you want to pick. The machine's doing that, so, or the program's doing that, so we can just focus on making sure the drawing looks right. Okay, continuing on, you would do a similar thing with the light blue. Basically, we'll draw a capped corner like we did before, so digitize and column. I'm not going to do the whole thing, or since I'm in a hurry, let me see if I can put my money where my mouth is and make this fast enough that we can continue our demonstration. So I'm going to create my triangle here, and I want to make it in the color of my actual artwork. So that's why I use my color mixer there, and I hit stitch it. I want to start here, and I want to end here, and then I'm going to kind of back out here a little bit and keep on drawing, and maybe draw it right up to that last end right there. So, and see how to keep the angle from, the reason why we broke up the tip so that we've got two separate shapes is that we're keeping the stitching from going around in that crazy curve like we saw with the shape that I kind of thought I had off to the side here. I don't, but we're not changing angle dramatically, and it winds up being a nicer looking satin stitch as a result. So I'll draw it right up to where I think it ought to overlap. Now this is a guess. I don't know how far I need to do it. That looks like I don't need to draw it quite up that high. So maybe a little bit long, give it a little bit more room. Okay, and again hit stitch it, start where we left off and where we're going to. And if I hide the artwork, you can see we're building that gradually. And to save time again, I'll zoom out. I want to copy and paste. I hit escape, get out of sewing mode or digitizing mode to copy, then paste. Set it down and rotate it. So design, change size, rotate it clockwise 90 degrees. If you really want to go crazy, if we can get this to line up, then you can actually do this. Look at that, that lines up very nicely. Not quite perfect, but really close to it. Then you can actually get all three of these steps here, and then copy, and then paste. Set it down and flip it 180 degrees, and that way I didn't even have to, I only had to do this once. So design, and then change size, and right there is where we've got that thing hidden. Flip it 180, rotate it 180 degrees, and hopefully that should meet right up with our artwork. So that as close as I can, and it really does look like it did. Looks like it's off a little bit, but that's okay. We can fix that. So I set that down, and I'm going to zoom with my Z, and then I can just edit the shape. You can see that's not quite where it needs to be, so I want to edit this shape, and you can just pick it, just drag the nodes over until it's exactly where you need it to be. So editing on the fly, notice I'm not having to go to a lot of different tools to do that. As I draw something and go on the, as I draw something, I can do a bunch of other things while I'm doing it in case I kind of mess up. Click enter button, that confirms my changes, and as I back out, I'll go to one-to-one to view everything, and I'll actually get rid of my outlines and get rid of my image. And you can see we're well on the way to digitizing this shape using a few shortcuts that's saving us from having to click over and over. And of course you can combine this with your lettering, so you don't have, why digitize a letter if you don't have to, and find a font that's close to this. I honestly don't know which font it is, but you can see you can size your letter. I'll hide my stitches so that makes it a little bit easier. Stretch it or whatever you need to do to make it as close as possible. In fact, I'm going to cheat. I don't have this font, but what I'm going to do is see if I can't fake the font by creating my stitches. And I want to make this a different color, so again, click on our swatch. I select my letter, and then I'll just pick white. Hit OK. Now I've got a white letter, but I want to see if I can't modify this font since I don't have this font. I know I don't. Hit outline mode, and I'll get rid of my stitching. And then I want to edit this letter, and you can see that you can actually just drag your points over until you're satisfied that you've got artwork that your digitizing artwork matches your customer's artwork. You can see, just like as if we drew it ourselves, you can actually modify the artwork, the outlines, so that it looks like you drew it yourself, or that it was completely customized for your customer's shape. So there we go, and hopefully that should solve our problem. You all get the idea. I don't have haven't drawn every little nuance in here, but hopefully we've kind of made that pretty close. And we can always back out and look at it. Get rid of our artwork. Go to 1-to-1 just to see. You can see that's pretty darn close. That's our digitized file. I'm going to actually save that. So sample star is what I called it. Okay, let's see what we got here. So we've got a couple questions. All right, Lisa's got a good one. When you're finished with the design, can you change the fabric choice automatically and adjust all the settings for a different garment? Great question. The answer is absolutely yes. So we save this for polar fleece so that when we make this into a DST file for our machine, it'll sew on polar fleece. But you know, the winter's almost over, so they're going to come back and your customers are going to love you and they want this on golf shirts. So just open this file again and just do this. Go to Design. Instead of doing it on the Embroidery Settings dialog box, just go to Design, Apply Fabric, and you have an idea of what it's going to do by looking at your stitch count. I'm at 4,800 stitches for this design that I digitized, but I can now go and find polo shirts, for example, and let's say we want on a piqué knit. So I find garments, jackets, polo style shirt. Jersey knit, as you know, is smooth, and piqué knit is a little bit rough and bumpy because you got that open weave. Hit OK, or I'm sorry, that open knit. And now we went from 4,800 stitches to 5,000. So it's added about 200 stitches worth of underlay and density. And then save your file as a DST. And then that file's, again, optimized for that kind of material. So really, really good in the way it handles that, so that you can actually open this file later, and let's say you're not sure what you digitize it for. You can select any piece here, and then go into your embroidery settings, go edit, go into editing, go to your embroidery settings. It'll tell you, oh, this is a piqué knit. See how it was polar fleece before, but because I went and changed the whole thing, now that's now for piqué knit. And the nice thing is you can create your own custom libraries as well of these settings. Okay, Lisa's next question, would we be able to do that with stock designs? A very good question. The answer is the special format here that allows you to edit and do things. For example, I can click on the letter A, and if we don't like that letter A and the font, then I can go into editing, and then I can actually pick a different font. I don't want that Shelton. Maybe I want a 2-letter applique and shape, and then hit stitch it, and now I've got a different now I've got an applique letter or a different font. So, but if you can probably guess, if you have a stock design that you've got, it's already reduced to DST, so you don't have these kinds of capabilities. So this is only going to be with the CHE file which was created in Stitch and Sew and remembers all the special information, such as piquet knits and golf shirts and or whatever they are. Now, that's not to say that you can't edit an existing design. Let's take something else, for example. Let's say that this is a design that I teach in class because it's actually a real live design that one of our customers was using. And this is a familiar logo that we've all seen. And it's digitized everywhere, obviously for fire departments. It's called the Maltese Cross. Let's make it appropriately red. Okay, but let's say, for example, that this is going to go on moisture-wicking garments, which I see often. Fire crews are I see showing up in a moisture management gear when they're not in their turnout gear. It's just really useful for them when they're working hard. And you can always look at a design to see how it was digitized. I don't remember how this one was done, but if I hit play, I can see that there's an underlay that seems to run under the whole thing, but then it starts to do my fire hydrant. In reality, if I was doing something really stretchy, I would want to do that entire underlay first before I even do my fire hydrant. So, in fact, I would want to make a couple of different passes. So what's kind of cool about this is that you can actually use this as a template and just add a little bit of underlay under here. So I'm going to digitize a light freeform tool, and I want to, instead of filling it in, I want to do what's called a satin line. And I can draw and trace this underneath, and what this is going to wind up being is a better underlay that will reinforce the shape. We're just going to make a quick minor edit to an existing stock design. So what we're doing is I'm just using the artwork to trace, go approximately down the middle as much as you can, of course. What we're going to do is digitize an additional stabilizing underlay under this for, again, as we're imagining, a moisture management garment, which needs that additional stabilization. So I'm going to set that around like this. So it has a little bit of stabilization, but I'm not crazy about it, again, because for something as shifty, as stretchy as these new moisture management garments. So what I wound up drawing is, you can see I can move it off to the side. I've drawn this shape. Well, I did draw the shape. I accidentally hit the delete key. Okay, let's do that again. So again, we're just modifying the underlay, and I'll show you one more example of this. That may be a little bit easier, but because we can only hide our underlay under the areas that are covered, then I'm having to trace carefully underneath the shapes of these satin borders, but that's okay. We're about done. And the nice thing is, once we've drawn this, if you want to adjust this underlay in the future, it will remember that your edits so that you can then edit them. And what I hit was O instead of 0. Now that's closed in. And again, a satin line, but I want a light density satin line. So I want to go into my settings here and set my density to something like 15. And instead of a full density satin, I don't want any other underlay because this is the underlay. Hit apply. Stitch it, start, end here. And if you look at it, what I just did, since it's covered up with the stitching, I created this. So that's going to help stabilize this a little bit more. And then all I do is, since it's going to sew right now on top, I just go ahead and just drag and drop that. Get rid of my little end marker here and just kind of switch positions. So now when I see this, I have my zigzag underlay and my running stitch underlay. I actually do the running stitch first, then the zigzag. But that will further stabilize the garment. So we've just modified a DST design. And let's say, for example, that another popular edit that some people might do is let's say I see sometimes this fire hydrant where this is filled in with something else, like maybe the engine company number. So you can actually hack, so to speak, existing designs without having to digitize. You can take advantage of what's there and then customize it to your customer's preferences. So in this case, I'm using editing. Now, always zoom into your work. So I hit the Z key, and then what I can do is actually cut these stitches out. Nice little, Jim, you're going to really like this. Stitch editing mode is hit the letter X, and now we're in stitch edit. And what you want to do is, I want to cut this fire hydrant. We want to find out where it joins the rest of the satin stitching. So I clicked on the nearest point, and because you've zoomed in, you hit the left and right arrow keys, and see that's the left arrow key. Now I'm going to hit the right arrow key, and I'm moving forward, 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 until I find that very last stitch. So you can see right there, and it even shows you down here that this is stitch number 1410, that we want to cut it right there. So we don't have to worry about the stitch number. We just know that it's in the right spot. Hit cut, and boom. You've noticed now that you can see that in our object list, it's showing a separate object that has the fire hydrant and then that running stitch. So what I'm going to do is I have to make a separate cut because we went in with a running stitch, and so now we're coming out with a running stitch. So we want to delete, we want to cut it at the other end. So I want to back out here. Let me see where it starts. So again, I want to go to, I'm in stitch editing. Let's see how it's building this. I want to back out. Okay, so I want to get it where it started here. And of course we can just hold this down. Let me see if it's going that way. Maybe it's going to, there we go. I want to get it at the starting point. So we're almost there. Okay, so it starts right there. So I want to make my second cut right there. And when we do this, we should see a completely separate fire hydrant that we can then delete out. And sure enough, we did. So I can now delete that fire hydrant, and then I can want right there. So, Lisa, to answer your question, these are the things you can do. Stock designs, you can edit their stability. Another thing you can do is actually edit the density of them. If you can go to Design, actually select it, and then right-click, select this, and right-click and go to Change Density. You can also increase or decrease your density as well, and even resize them. So it's always easier to do it with something you digitize in the program, but you're not stuck with your current designs. You can always do some things to change and improve the quality, optimize them for different things that you're going to do, or just cut and combine them into different pieces. So this is digitizing and editing in this lesson here. Hopefully this will be useful in making you more productive with your digitizing.